Spider-Man No Way Home came out in 2021 and is the newest addition to the franchise of the MCU. This movie follows on from the side effects of Far From Home, the previous Spider-Man movie featuring Tom Holland, and this announced at the end of that movie that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and this follows on from that movie practically, and it now tells the whole New York, I think, or it might be the whole world, that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, in which obviously this is going to cause him a lot of stress because now everyone knows who he is, and they obviously, because at the end of that movie they also pinned Spider-Man as the killer of Mysterio. So this didn't work out well for Peter, put it that way. And the start of the movie, he's getting blamed for Mysterio's death, and he's getting blamed for everything that happened in London. And yeah, if you haven't seen the Far From Home movie, I've sort of just spoiled it for you. But hey ho. So, this movie kicks off from obviously the side effects, and it's just Peter trying to get away from the media, basically. Trying to get away from all these people that now know he is Spider-Man, because Peter just wanted his friends, his family, just to know who he was. And he tells you in this film that that's what he wanted, just his friends and his family knowing he was Peter, knowing that he was Spider-Man, sorry. And this now was the worst for him. And from this, his friends are punished also, as MJ and Ned are punished by knowing Peter Parker, the person, as they're potentially hanging around with the killer, potentially hanging around with a menace. And this doesn't go well for Peter at all, as he can't get into college, which is their version of uni. MJ can't get into college, and neither can Ned, in which are very, very, very bad for them, because this thing that has been created has now affected their futures, basically. And obviously Peter blames himself for this, so he goes to his friend Doctor Strange, in which he wants a spell putting on the world, or on New York, to forget about Peter Parker. However, the spell doesn't go as planned, because when Doctor Strange is casting this spell, Peter keeps changing parts of the spell, in which caused the spell to collapse. Hence why in the trailer you will see Sandman running around, Green Goblin running around, who else is in there? You've got Lizard, all these, Doc Ock, you've got all these famous Spider-Man villains in the same universe as the Tom Holland Spider-Man, because they all know Peter Parker. And the spell bodging up now means that everyone from different universes has come to the universe, in which is bad for Tom Holland now, because he's got to fight off and send back 6 villains. So let's talk about the nitty-gritty of Spider-Man No Way Home, and let's go into why this movie is good. So the first thing I found about this movie that I really liked was the unique story, because in superhero movies we always see you've got, no matter what it is, the superhero always comes out on top by killing or arresting the villain. This movie is different. This movie is the thorough aim of this movie is to cure the villains. So to actually cure villains, rather than just throwing them in a prison cell or killing them, this movie cures the villains, in which is awesome. Because after Peter Parker finds out, which is Tom Holland's Peter Parker, finds out that these villains die at the hands of other Spider-Men from other universes, he tries to send these villains back with the intention of curing them first, so they don't have the fate they do have, in which is die to the hands of either Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man or Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, in which he prevents, if you watch this movie. And I've really enjoyed the uniqueness of this story, as I've never seen a film like it. You watch all these other Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 1 of Tobey Maguire's, and even the Amazing Spider-Man. You've got this thing of the villain comes out as a loser, and the hero comes out as a winner because they either the supervillain is dead or arrested, or he isn't cured, he isn't put in rehabilitation. That's what happens. Whereas this movie goes into the nitty-gritty and goes, hang on a minute, what haven't we done before? We're going to cure them and stop them from ever facing Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man or ever facing Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, in which sort of rewrites history and sort of makes everything better and makes their fate better for these people. Because if you look back at all the villains, these villains never wanted to be villains. These villains were carved into villains by mistakes. Let's look at other villains as well, not just Doc Ock, not just Green Goblin, the likes of Electro and Lizard. Lizard just wanted to grow his arm back in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. However, he turned into a lizard. So they put the rights wrong and turned him back to a normal being. Then you've got Electro, who falls into a vat of eels, electric eels, in which then he becomes Electro. So they take the electricity out of him basically, and he becomes normal again. Same with Green Goblin. He didn't want to become he didn't necessarily want to become Green Goblin as such. He wanted this project to be something like someone that can be superhuman and have the suit and have this glider and stuff like that. However, the trials didn't go as planned, as he then turned evil. Same with Doc Ock. Doc Ock made these arms so that these arms could be helpful for the person using them. However, when the brain chip at the side of his neck gets damaged, he then becomes sort of the arm slave, basically. So obviously none of these, and same with Sandman, he falls into a vat of sand, and he then, after being spun around a few times, becomes Sandman, but he weren't wanting to become Sandman. These people didn't want to become villains, and that's what I like about this movie, as this movie cures them because they were normal people once. So yeah, I really like this as, yeah, it's different. We've seen several MCU movies that have just done the same thing, basically. And this movie explores everything, in which is great. I also really enjoyed how they utilize the villains correctly, because we've obviously gone on about how they cure them, but I liked it how the director and the writers managed to make the spotlight on certain villains, because we all know that Sandman is nowhere near as good as Green Goblin. We know that. We've watched Spider-Man 3 and we've watched Spider-Man 1, and we can tell you right now that Spider-Man 1 is clearly better than Spider-Man 3, and Sandman is the weaker villain out of the two. And I liked it how they put most of the spotlight on the likes of the most dangerous, so like your Doc Ock, your Green Goblin, and your Electro, as those three villains are probably the most dangerous villains out of the two different Spider-Man franchises. And to me, it was great to see, as you had Spider-Man attacking most of the time Green Goblin or Doc Ock, in which we all wanted to see Tom Holland mix it up with the two, rather than mix it up with Sandman, in which would have been quite boring if I'm going to be honest. And he also fought Electro. They didn't really, and like I said before, they prioritised what they wanted you to see, which was your Doc Ocks, your Green Goblins, your Sellers, basically. But then they also had your side little villains in your Sandman and your Lizard. Because Lizard, to be fair, didn't have a big part in this one at all. Because at first, I wasn't sure if they were going to allow him to speak, as he was sat there in the chambers in Doctor Strange's lab, sort of thing, not talking. So I thought, have they changed the voice actor maybe, or something like that? But then obviously started talking. Then it was the person who played him. But he was a side villain and a very weak one. Weak villain as a whole. So obviously they prioritized the major villains, that we love from the older movies, and then from the movies that they didn't really like, or the villains they didn't really like, they put them as side villains, which is good. Because we all know which villains are going to make a bigger impact than others, and this movie showed what to do. And it didn't feel overcrowded like Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2. This movie felt that everybody got their own little way to make it shine, but others got the spotlight more than others. And that was good. Whereas in Spider-Man 3, they tried to put, you've got Sandman, and you've got Venom, and you've got Green Goblin, and that didn't work. So it was nice to see Marvel and MCU get this fucking banger. I also liked how they decided to kill Aunt May off, as this has never been done before in any of the franchises, and it felt fresh. Because how many times have we sat here and seen Uncle Ben die? Honestly. And what I like about the MCU Spider-Man franchise as a whole is the fact that they don't show Uncle Ben in the whole thing. Because how many times have we seen the guy die? You know what I mean? And it was nice to see him just go, okay, he's not there in Homecoming, and that he died ages ago. And yeah, it was nice to see. And the fact that Aunt May died this time, it was more of a... because we didn't expect it, because we've never seen Aunt May die in any of the Spider-Man movies. They might have in some cartoon things, and I know in the comics Aunt May does get killed. However, it was nice to see on TV and on film this actually unfold. I also could not ignore Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in this movie, as they, to me, sort of polished off this movie. As we all knew before the movie that there was rumours of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in this movie, and it was good to see our expectations being met with those two surprising us and appearing in this movie. And they just brought to life the last third of this movie, where the entire movie really kicks off with the big battle. And it was great, as when Andrew Garfield first came through, because he was the first one to make his way into this movie. Tom Maguire was after, but Andrew Garfield came into this movie and immediately dressed in a Spider-Man costume and fucking hanging off the ceiling and shit like that. Then when Tobey came in, he weren't in a Spider-Man costume, he was in his normal clothing, and you could feel, and I remember being at the cinema when this when I went to go see No Way Home, people cheered and clapped when both Andrew and Tobey appeared, and it showed how much of a big sort of impact they had on us as kids and as us as adults. They played Spider-Man brilliantly in their respective times and their respective franchises, and it was nice to see their two franchises meet up and interact with each other, basically. So yeah, it was nice to see Tobey and Andrew sort of teaming up at the start and getting to know each other. And the great scene was when Tom Holland, Tobey, and Andrew Garfield were talking about Tobey's webs being organic, and this was awesome. This was awesome because if you don't know, Andrew Garfield had to make his own web shooters, and so did Tom Holland's Spider-Man. However, Tom Maguire's in the original Sam Raimi series, he made it so that Spider-Man had web shooters in his actual wrists, so he didn't have to. So they were organic, and that he could develop them by his body. Whereas both Andrew and Holland had to create their own web shooters. They had all the moves, but not the webs in which they had to create themselves. And this was cool to see them interacting, and I think one of them even turned around and said, "Can you create these webs anywhere else on your body rather than just your wrist?" And which was quite funny. And yeah, they brought this exciting energy, and at times they brought the depressing sort of emotional side of their characters, as you see Andrew Garfield, probably in the last third, like I said, show a lot of emotion, like when he catches MJ when she's falling off the scaffolding. He catches her, in which he should have done with Gwen Stacy in Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it's a little homage to that. And it's like he feels a bit of relief that he was able to sort of rewrite history with somebody else's girlfriend, and that it was sort of sad for him because he could have done that the first time and probably saved her. However, it didn't go like that in Amazing Spider-Man 2, did it? And it was great to see Garfield and Holland also express their emotions, as well as Maguire, their own personal experience of loss, because after Aunt May dies, that's where the Spidermen come into it as a whole, and they talk to Tom Holland Spider-Man, and he's like, it's going to be okay, and that I know you feel like you're angry, you're upset, and that you want to kill him. However, we all went down that same route, and it didn't go to plan, basically. And that obviously Tom Maguire's got experience of that, of being sort of seeing his Uncle Ben get shot and being there at the death of his best friend. And you obviously see that with Andrew Garfield, because he lost Gwen in that exact same mould, and he lost Gwen's father, in which were both inspirational for him as a character developing as the Amazing Spider-Man. And yeah, it was great to see them two give tips to Tom Holland Spider-Man, in which hopefully will take on as the MCU franchise continues, because obviously I think there's definitely going to be a Spider-Man 4 coming. So yeah, I've really enjoyed seeing the connections between all three Spider-Men in this movie. I also really liked the ending where they all get cured, but I also really liked, just before we get to the end credit scene, I also liked the ending, the emotional end in that we probably did not expect, in which is that Peter had to redo the spell again in order to fix the time fucking exploding and going all into a mess, basically. And this meant that everyone had to forget who Peter Parker was, and obviously that meant MJ and Ned, who he obviously spent the last two movies with, being the best mates, one being girlfriend of him. And it was great to see this emotional thing of him basically keeping them safe at the same time, and him basically having to say goodbye to them because they won't remember who he is. And obviously there's rumours already that that MJ could remember who he is, because obviously in the coffee shop at the end of the movie, they've already forgotten about him at this point. He walks in, buys a coffee, and is interacting with Mary Jane, or MJ, because her name's not Mary Jane in that, it's something else. Anyways, he interacts with MJ and basically gets to talk to her, and she clearly doesn't have a clue who she is, but there's inklings that she could remember. And yeah, it was one of those where they could use a future storyline there, and it was really cool, a real cool ending to see. Finally, I really liked the end credit scene. The first one, that is. The second one was just plain shite, which we'll get to later on. But the first end credit scene was absolutely great, because it showed Tom Hardy as Venom. Obviously, because if you do not know, Tom Hardy plays Venom in the Marvel universe, not the MCU, but in the Marvel as a whole. And it hinted that Venom could be potentially have been left, like a little embryo, or Venom had been left behind in the MCU when Tom Hardy's Venom went back to his own world. In which I hope that Tom Hardy does eventually come to the MCU. However, there's probably not gonna be that, as I think it'll just be the Venom embryo that's stuck in Tom Holland's world. But it could be either, and there's rumours that Tom Hardy's probably going to appear in the Amazing Spider-Man 3 movie that's rumoured, with Andrew Garfield being the Spider-Man versus Venom, which is Tom Hardy, in which would be cool to see. Or there's also been touting that he could go head-to-head with Tom Holland, because neither of those two have come against Venom yet. So we shall see, because obviously it's not going to be Tobey Maguire, because one, people are touting that he's too old, and two, he's already faced Venom, and it would probably make next to no sense why he would need to face him again. However, this movie did not smell of roses whatsoever. It had an inkling of shit at the same time. And let me tell you where that inkling of shit is. It's right at the end of the movie. After all the credits, it's at the last end credit scene. They fucking stick Doctor Strange trailer at the end of that movie. And for those who didn't go to this and watch it, it was awful, because me and my brother sat there, waited. We watched the Eddie Brock little clip, the end credit scene, but then there was another one, and my brother were like, "We've got to stay and wait." I was like, "Are you sure?" And then it came around eventually after about, I don't know, it felt like 20 minutes, even though it was probably like 5. After scrolling through, then they just played the Doctor Strange trailer, in which was so disappointing and disheartening, because if you don't know, they released that trailer like a week before Spider-Man came out. So me and my brother had already seen that trailer maybe once or twice. So it was so fucking like disappointing. It was unbelievable, because we expected to see something to do with Spider-Man, or something to do with a new MCU movie, as there was toutings that there was going to be maybe, this was after the film's release, by the way, that the end credit scene was originally planned to be Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, or both, going back to their own universe and their own worlds, in which would have been cool to see, and then maybe interacting with either an MJ, or maybe Andrew Garfield, I don't know, interacting with, fuck knows, a Green Goblin, or someone like that. You know what I mean? Setting up their universes for something bigger. You don't have to kick it off as such, but you could have them there laid out in case anybody wants to use them in future, in which they missed a trick there. If they didn't want to do that, they could have done a different end credit scene, maybe of more on Fury, more on Thor, more on, I don't know, Doctor Strange maybe. Not like, maybe show a clip of Doctor Strange like doing something with, I don't know, fucking, I don't know, but show Doctor Strange doing something with somebody out his next movie, so it hints at the next movie, rather than fucking shutting down everything with just a trailer, which was very, very disappointing. So to summarise this incredible generational Spider-Man movie, I think this is one of my favourite and one of the best Spider-Man films of all time now, because I always used to rate Spider-Man 2 as the best. Right, nothing comes better than Spider-Man 2. That's the original franchise, by the way. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2. And nothing got better than that. That was peak Spider-Man. However, this one came along and was like, yo, we're generational, we're going to bring all the Spider-Mans together. And I was like, oh, fuck me. And they perfected it stupendously. And the villains worked, everything worked. And to me, this is on the same level now as Spider-Man 2. I don't think any Spider-Man has over-hit Spider-Man 2 yet, but this one leveled with it, definitely, and I really enjoyed this movie, and I think it'll be one that I'll be watching many, many more times, and yeah, I think it was generational, and something that had never happened before. Hence why I've gave it a 9.6 out of 10, which I believe is the highest rating yet. And that's because it was that damn good. In terms of a superhero rating, it was one of the better ones. I don't think it's quite as good as Endgame. I think that's still going to be the best rating of a superhero film. But this was iconic, and yeah, So if you've enjoyed this video, guys, like, subscribe and comment, hit that notification bell for alerts of when I next make a video. And yeah, see you guys in the next one. Laters. Before you go, click this one to see more reviews like this one. Honestly, a full playlist here for you to go and check out. Click this one. However, if you just want to watch just one more video, just click this one. This is our newest video right here. Or if you just sort of I'm not bothered about another video, well, I've got a treat for you. Just hit that subscribe button, so then you're alerted to the newest one. So then if you're not too bothered now, you can come back later. And also press that notification bell as well. It'll really help us out. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know, like I said, in the comments down below what films you want to see in here, and we can do it for you. Thanks.